Well, talk about a tough gig. Competing with a cup of coffee and something nice for morning tea, but I'll do my best for you and hopefully you'll be able to get a cup of coffee after that. I'm here actually speaking in place of Donna Mogg, who was originally scheduled to speak at this time. Unfortunately, she's had a family medical emergency and I've had to step up to the plate. So she said that her talk was going to be hard-hitting and a little bit controversial. I'm not sure if I'll convey that, but I'll do the best that I can in this space, because I know that this is such an important and critical issue for the horticulture industry. When I speak to the growers who are our members and I ask them what their number one issue is, consistently it is labour. It's access to labour and cost of labour. So this is absolutely critical for the future of our industry, and we need to work together to ensure that we have positive outcomes in this space. So, reform, what does it actually mean? According to the Oxford Dictionary, it is to make changes in something, especially an institution or practice, in order to change it. And I think the key message here is that reform in this space is not just about something that government has to do, it's something that all of us within the horticulture industry have to do. We all have our place in ensuring that we have reform in this space. It's been a pretty active area, some ways not for the best reasons. We've all probably heard about the backpacker tax. There's been coverage that you wouldn't say was necessarily positive for the horticulture industry in terms of the ABC Four Corners Slaving Away program. There's increased scrutiny from the Fair Work Ombudsman through the Harvest Trail campaign. There's been a range of inquiries around visa and employment-related inquiries. There's the Modern Award Review and all of the issues around labour hire contractors. Okay, backpacker tax. Now, unless you've been sleeping under a log somewhere, you've probably heard of this particular issue. It's difficult because it's a little bit to understand exactly what is going on, but the proposition put forward by the government last budget, so not the most recent budget but the one before, was that they would change the mechanism through which the tax was applied so that backpackers, as we call them, or working holiday makers, would be taxed at 32.5 cents in the dollar from the first dollar that they earn. Now, technically, most of the people we claim as backpackers should not actually be residents for Australian tax purposes. So the government is saying, but we're just closing a loophole. But we all know that in real terms, this makes a significant difference to the amount of money that the backpackers take home, and that makes a significant difference to their willingness to come and work in Australia as opposed to other countries like New Zealand and Canada. And I know that most of the growers I speak to are absolutely reliant on these backpackers as a key labour source. Basically, a group of the farming organisations got together prior to the election, including ourselves, Voice of Horticulture, National Farmers Federation, cotton, cane, dairy, a range of organisations, and we determined that an appropriate level would be a 19% tax rate from the first dollar that the backpacker earns. So therefore we're still getting rid of the tax-free threshold, but this is a fair and equitable rate, and it is the same amount as is paid when you first start paying tax. There were discussions around whether it should have been a 15% tax rate in line with the seasonal workers program, but we have to remember that from a government's perspective, that program has an aid component as well as just a taxation component or a workforce component. Therefore, it was considered that 19% was a fair and reasonable amount. So, what has happened? Well, we have kicked up a pretty big stink and we've made our voices heard very loudly on social media, anti-social media, any kind of media that you'd like to think of. And basically, the coalition during the election campaign said that they would hold off the implementation of the new backpacker tax arrangements until the 1st of January, which I guess is a reprieve and it's a small win, I would suggest, but for most growers it's not enough. They want the certainty, they want to be sure that their labour force is going to be available in that peak summer season. So, We are continuing to lobby. What the Coalition also committed to was a workforce review. Now, you might not be able to read all of these terms of reference. They're hoping to cover off on all of these and make a report by October so that they can make a determination in time for January. And I'll just quickly go through with you what they are, because as industries, we need to provide the best information we can into this review, and we're going to have to do it quickly. So we're going to have to get our acts together. So the terms of reference are, they're going to look at Australia's competitive position in attracting seasonal and temporary foreign labour, including comparative wages, entitlements and conditions, comparative taxation, comparative superannuation, promotional programs and costs and barriers to entry. They're going to look at regulatory imposts on employers. They're going to look at labour hire companies and worker exploitation. They're going to look at matching employers with workers. They're going to look at changes to the use of volunteer or unpaid labour, which most of you would know as woofers. They're going to look at the capacity to attract seasonal workers and opportunity to expand supply. So looking at other countries and the seasonal worker programs and how we compete with them. Looking at short-term and long-term agricultural and tourism labour needs, policies to attract unemployed Australians and consistent tax treatment between the different classes of temporary work visas. I pretty much think it's going to take me till October to actually read most of the terms of reference, let alone respond to them in a meaningful way. And so we are going to have to get our skates on as industry to make sure that we provide the information that we need. There's some surveys being conducted at the moment. The vegetable industry, or the vegetable levy, is currently funding a survey through the University of Adelaide. So if somebody rings you from the University of Adelaide and wants to ask you about your workforce and labour needs, please talk to them, because we need to be able to provide them with good, factual, evidence-based information to put forward the case to ensure that the backpacker tax doesn't go ahead. What else is happening, as if that wasn't enough? There has been a Senate Education and Employment References Committee report which has described, and this is not just horticulture as you can see, but it's not a good look for our industry, blatant and pervasive abuse of the Working Holiday Maker visa program by a network of labour hire companies in the horticulture sector. This is not a good look for our industry, and I understand that many of them are through labour hire companies, but it reflects really poorly on horticulture, and we need to work together to overcome that perception. The Working Holiday Makers program was initially implemented as a cultural exchange program, so it is considered to be a lightly regulated program. I would assume that one of the outcomes from this review, if it goes ahead, is that the Working Holiday Maker program will become much more tightly regulated, as it'll have greater recognition of its role as a labour source for the agricultural and tourism sectors. So that's one of our issues that we have to deal with. The next is that Fair Work is on the warpath, which they should be. It is their role to ensure compliance, and it is their role to make sure that they are doing the right thing. It's a bit like speeding. If you're not doing the wrong thing, you won't get fined. So what are they doing? They've implemented a program called the Fair Work Ombudsman Harvest Trail Campaign. Basically, it's to try and educate growers about what their obligations are. So they've done audits on farm which have no kind of compliance component and said, look, you're doing okay, but in most cases they've got around a 66% compliance rate. It also helps them to identify the areas where there's significant non-compliance and perhaps work with industry organisations to understand why and to understand what mechanisms can be put in place to overcome that. The next step that will be taken by the Fair Work Ombudsman is around enforcement. So they're saying this was our being a nice guy, next we're going to go into enforcement. In 2015, the Fair Work Commission's matters, which I'm not exactly sure what that means, but they had 25,000 requests for assistance, and $22.3 million was recouped for 12,000 workers. Of 2,163 overseas workers, 1,971 was settled. And I keep forgetting to change my slides on the thing. So there's the slide there. The other big issue that I'm sure most of you are aware of, and I know Queensland growers are because we've been bashing them over the head with it for months, and I'm sure apple growers are as well because I know they've been bashed over the head with it quite significantly as well, is the Modern Award Review. So the Horticulture Award is under review as part of a review process, which is a standard process. And NFF, along with the newly or fairly newly formed Voice of Horticulture, put in a submission. The hearings are on the 11th to the 15th of July, and they're looking at a number of union claims. These include 4-hour minimum engagement. Now, this represents a significant issue for growers as far as I'm aware, because if you have a situation where you have 100 workers turn up on your property, a big storm comes in an hour later, you have to pay those workers for that entire 4-hour period. So that is actually quite a big problem. There's also an issue around the conversion of casual to full-time or permanent employees. And the feedback we've had from a number of casual employees is that they don't want to be converted to full-time or part-time employees. They prefer to have the 25% loading and the flexibility. So we will be fighting against that. There's also a whole range of issues around notice requirements, including likely hours, restrictions on further casual and part-time employment to require additional hours to existing casuals and part-time employees. So there's a lot of areas in this modern award review that will cause lack of or reduced flexibility and higher costs for growers. And like I said, APAL has been very active in this space, and I believe John Dollison is one of the witnesses appearing, and he's been speaking quite regularly to the barrister, as has Donna Mogg and a number of growers. So it's important that you support those people, all 28 of them, who are standing up on behalf of your industry. There we go. So, now, we've talked about the broader issues and what's happening in the bigger landscape, but the most important place for reform and the most important place for action is on farm. And that is the responsibility of growers. And that's the responsibility of growers and their neighbours. Everyone collectively has a responsibility here. And how do you actually manage it? It is a confusing and difficult space, and we don't deny that. The top level thing is to ensure that you are compliant. Do your risk management. Then you need to obviously look at the issue around labour hire contractors. It's very important to ensure that you're managing your supply chain responsibilities. So, how can you assess your risk and get compliant? There's a couple of options. The Fair Work Commission has a basic self-audit, and they're saying that you need to understand the industrial instruments. You need to understand the modern awards and the national employment standards. You need to know leave entitlements. You need to understand the pay and conditions that you are obliged to provide for your workers. You need to provide certain record keeping with regard to time and wages. You need to know what your obligations are with relation to dismissal and bargaining. The list goes on. It's not easy, it's not straightforward. Now, I am going to do a plug for our organisation, but I'm also going to do a plug for the other state farming bodies, such as New South Wales Farmers Federation and Victorian Farmers Federation. We all provide industrial relations support for our members, and we undertake risk assessments with our members to enable them to identify what their risks are in this space and provide them with individualised support to help them through this maze. This is a good way of understanding what your obligations are. Now, the thorny issue of labour hire contractors. This is a very difficult issue because labour hire contractors are an important and useful thing in the horticulture industry. For many businesses, labour hire contractors save a lot of time, reduce costs, reduce the need to invest in HR and a whole range of things. So we are not saying we need to move away from labour hire contractors. We are just saying it is important that you know what your obligations are in this space, because you cannot just hand over the responsibility to the labour hire contractor. So you have an obligation to work with legitimate operators, do due diligence to establish bona fides. Now, I know this is difficult because there's Phoenix companies. One day they're here, one day they're not. You hear that somebody's dodgy and the next week they've turned up under a different name with a different front man. It does make it difficult. One of the things you can consider is having a written labour hire agreement with each labour hire contractor, setting out your responsibilities and obligations. We have a template, and I believe other organisations do. But the really important thing to understand is that you are actually liable in this space. So This is what this thing here, accessory. What is an accessory? Well, a farmer who has used a labour hire contractor and the labour hire contractor is not doing the right thing, that grower is considered an accessory. You are at risk of significant reputational damage as you have the likelihood of being publicly named in any litigation. It can have quite significant impacts on your supply chain relationships. And there are personal penalties of up to $10,800 per breach. You must know what your labour hire company is up to. You must check what they are doing. I cannot stress that strongly enough. It is your responsibility, and it's like anything else. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So, we have also heard a number of cases where growers are absolutely doing the right thing. They are paying the right money. They are ticking all the boxes. They are doing absolutely the right thing, but that money is not going to the workers. So I advise actually asking the workers now and then whether they think that they are being paid correctly and appropriately. As I said earlier, it's very important to ensure that you are undertaking your due diligence. Natalie James, who is the Fair Work Ombudsman, says a compliant supply chain is everyone's business. You cannot hand off responsibility for this to somebody else. So, to sum up, we understand as an advocacy organisation and working with other advocacy organisations how important this area is to our growers. And we need, as an industry, to get on the front foot and tell our employment story. Most growers do the right thing. Most growers treat their workers incredibly fairly. I was listening to a talk by one of our growers in the Lockyer Valley on Wednesday, and she actually said, you know, I hope that my kids, when they get older, are backpackers around Europe, and I would never dream of treating my staff in a way that I wouldn't want my own children to be treated. And I think that's a good way to think about it when you're thinking about this issue. I know of other growers. I know a strawberry grower who has employed backpackers for the last 20 years, and he actually went to a reunion in Japan of all the backpackers who've worked with them over many, many years. There's lots of really positive and good stories, and as an industry, we need to start promoting them much more successfully. We also need to talk about the particular and unique needs of our industry in the employment space. As we always say, a zucchini doesn't know what day of the week it is. Penalty rates on weekends, we have to continue to fight against that. We must ensure that we don't have to be paying double time and a half on Sundays because we cannot afford that, we cannot bear that burden. And we are price takers. That's not an excuse to do the wrong thing, but it is an excuse for us to ensure that we lobby for the best deal for our industry. Obviously, the next thing that growers need to do is get compliant. There's no excuses. There's lots of people who can help you. It is possible, and we really urge you for your own sake and the sake of your industry to do so. I think also it's important for growers to engage with some of these bigger issues, engage with the issues around the backpacker tax, the award review, the labour force stories, and be part of the good story about employment in horticulture. And obviously the next one, and possibly the most tricky one, is managing your labour hires. I think this review that the Coalition have put on the table will be a fantastic opportunity to flush out some of these issues and hopefully get some positive change in this area, but the timeframes are extraordinarily short, and that means that we are going to be having to work very hard to make sure we provide the right information and get the right long-term outcomes. It seems ironic that this is the kind of review that we've probably been asking for the last 10 years, and they want us to do it in 3 months. But that's how we roll, I guess. And the final one is something I want to leave you with. It's this concept of the social licence to operate. You might have heard of it in relation to the beef industry, where people are saying that their social licence to operate is being compromised by the live export issue. People are saying that the community is no longer supportive of the beef industry or as supportive as they used to be, and is starting to place very close scrutiny on what they're doing because of the live export scandal. I would argue that for the horticulture industry, this is our live export issue. If there are pictures of people, sleeping 25 to a house, being paid $3 an hour, effectively being slaves in our country, then that will impact on our social licence to operate. And the other thing that it will impact on is it will add credibility to the efforts by the big supermarket chains to start putting in ethical worker obligations into your current audits and things that you have to comply with to feed into the suppliers as the big supermarkets, which is what they do in other countries. The thing is that in other countries like the US, they don't have the robust workforce relations legislation that we have here. But if they think that it will assist them in improving their image to the customer, then they will push back down on you in terms of delivering these so-called ethical supply contracts. So, like I said, this is an important issue for all of us. We all have a responsibility. We've got some good news to tell, and I hope that collectively we can tell our story and do the right thing. Thank you.